minutes,
This
make sure everyone's
conference will
here.
now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our first LPANS webinar in a while. I'd very much like to thank Dr. Habib from the Dalhousie School of Planning and DalTRAC for being here for our webinar. Many of you probably know Dr. Habib. He focuses on transportation and land use, and I'm going to turn it over to him because he's the man you're here to talk to. So thank you very much, Dr. Habib.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here and presenting some of our recent work during this COVID time, although it's in the virtual setting. But this COVID-19 fundamentally changed many things in our lives. At the same time, it also changed many things in our research agenda. Today, I'm really happy to show a couple of quite interesting and I would say very novel work that our graduate students are doing here at DalTRAC. And I'm happy to, at the end of the presentation, entertain questions, and we'll go from there. So as you I alluded to the idea that whenever the lockdown happened, the lockdown of our lab, it's very personal at the same time. We went back to the drawing board and tried to see what we can do, really understanding how COVID-19 is probably changing transportation and emission in particular. Part of the reasoning is we were seeing at the very beginning, just a second, looks like the slide distribution is not working. Okay, wonderful. So we really felt that like this COVID-19 has a very different way, the way we are handling at the very beginning. There might be direct linkages with transportation, and we should be putting all of our energy and resources at the time on that. So today I will, at the very beginning, give that background, and then I'll talk about only two issues from our research. One is how COVID-19 has some impact on the travel mode and how we tried to capture those understanding. And the second one is COVID-19 and how traffic and emission got impacted, utilizing some of the transport modeling tools that we are developing for years. So we found that very useful to come up with quite a bit of good results and understanding of what's going on. So if you heard in the news and all others, or even if you experience, like one of the biggest thing happened with COVID-19 is we are not traveling much. So the impact on the transportation is quite significant. The first thing what public health did, instead of trying to go for the vaccine, or some testing started at that time, but the most of the energy put for COVID response is this non-clinical solution of mobility restrictions, which in a way meaning that shutting down the transportation system for non-essential workers and all other activities. And since we were working always from this activity-based travel modeling or analysis perspective in our lab, we thought like this is the right time to jump in and really see what's going on here. And there was at the very beginning, you will see some of our research is more time stamped as well. So some research we did in the first few months of the lockdown and then the reopening stages. So you might get a little bit confused as you go, what is the reopening one, for instance, because we were doing those as the COVID-19 was happening, starting from March 2020. So first of all, there was at the time when we started like putting together our research agenda, we were looking at the literature and they were saying there might be subsequent waves, even in the wave one. So some of this particular first research that I will be talking about was right on first wave, like when we wanted to look at. So we started with literature review, try to understand like what's happening around the world or what happened historically for the 10 major influenza pandemic. We looked at those Spanish flu, like lots of like public health outcomes, but at the same time we started identifying that transportation is a vector. Like into 2019 H1N1, most of them was in shipyard, rail stations, and also with COVID-19 at the time there was a very minimal information coming out, but we were seeing that the air travel, for instance, like was the major diffuser for those kind of things. And even there was an initial report at the time we started this research from New York by Harris 2020, which inspired us a lot that there is something going on with the subway diffusion at the local level area. And we were interested in the local level, not as much on the air travel or other larger pieces. And looking at the activity restriction at the same time, those movement patterns, we felt that what is the way forward at that time? Doing a survey at the middle of the lockdown or the first month of the lockdown did not seem quite a good research strategy. So we started looking at the social media and use some of our expertise on data mining, particularly for two things to look at, like what is the immediate impact or immediate effect on travel mode, how public discourse is happening on that realm, what we can learn from those understandings so that we can inform some decision making. At the same time, there was a huge rush in the academic community as well to learn and understand like how we can go forward in going deeper understanding of this phenomena or this challenge, COVID-19 challenge. We also started very optimistically at that time that what can we do for the reopening at the very beginning? Like what will be the challenges? What will be the opportunities? So we try to start collecting social media data starting in March and April, just after 1 month of that time, with a various keywords, public transit, cars, bicycle, reopening, using those tags platform, using one API. And then we started then also try to geotag them to get like separate them out from North American versus European responses. And we utilize in vivo pro software to categorize them just to understand what's going on. And we have a couple of like discussion with some social media data mining experts to see like how we can organize those thoughts. And we did a lot of text mining, topic modeling, like to partly for graduate students to get their degree, but at the same time to bring more advanced techniques to thematize them in a more consistent and structured manner. And at the end, we analyzed 600 tweets, and the major areas of focus was public transit, bicycle, car, and reopening strategies. And a couple of the major ideas or words, I would say, in this particular table is for the public transit. There was an urge for the reopening strategies. Like people were talking about there are improvement opportunities. There was a 11% of talk or public discourse on transit worker challenges. Ridership challenges was early on, and these are early detection. We are not talking about later on. These are more real-time research, and that's made me very excited about this research as we were learning. Shutting down on the transit, some people were really looking at those kind of discussions. And for the bicycle, like people were optimistic. They were saying, oh, we'll be preferring cycle over other modes, and cycle sale increase, people were reporting. And these are not the facts that we collected. These are the things that people were talking about in Twitter data. And health benefit of cycling, people talked about those type of things as well. For the car, like all biggest discussion was what will be the consequences of car. Does the car sales going up? Is it preference for car will be go up? What will be the climate change impact of those type? How we can do sanitization, parking, and those type of things. For the reopening, people were conservative in one segment, but in other segments, people wanted to reopen. Some people wanted strategies for safe reopening, and some people wanted to not reopen the schools at the very moment of that particular time, and some people were for reopening for the more economic growth. Those type of discussion, we need to restart economy. So it was very interesting to see, and that very early stage of our lockdown period, how we started thinking about, meaning like the public started thinking about on this very, very issue we transportation planners as well as the land use and general planners are concerned about. So we started also putting some word clouds, what's coming from those tweets that you can see for the public transit group. Mandatory mask was early on suggested by the people, and there are lots of other chatter as well. For the bicycle, people were worried about public transport might not be, and some of those connotation, the words that you are seeing may not be just the positive way, it could be also the negative way. People are, oh, public transit, we are not safe in the public transit, so maybe the bike and other things, and maybe promoting World Bicycle Day. Those type of discussions were happening on that period. Car, many people were saying it was safe, it's open, keep driving, travel, and lots of regular car culture types of discussions went on. In the reopening tweet or that thematic area, new cases, like that was the fear, that was the biggest chatter on that. The school businesses were in the opposite direction in certain way. Some people wanted to reopen the schools, some people didn't, some people wanted economy to move forward. So those were kind of like our synthesize from word cloud. Then we went a little bit deeper. We started looking at the topic modeling techniques, trying to see some of the cluster of thoughts, some of their probabilities, which in a way consistent with our initial reconnaissance results that I just talked about. But you'll see for the public transit, like the mask requirement is required, guidelines were expected, employee care, those kind of things, like where their riders protection, some of the workers and stores, how we can go there, how we can do shopping, those kind of discussions was happening on that from our topic modeling work. We also looked at the bicycle, the similar kind, like how we can move forward, how active travel can be a part of a solution to COVID-19 challenges, mobility restrictions. Those type of discussions were happening, how we can do even cities, infrastructure developments so that we grow in a more sustainable way. Those discussions was happening too. For the car, similar kind, like it's probably safer mode, how we can do those kind of things, and how they may grow. The reopening side, I already explained some of those. There was tensions in the Twitter conversations, so we tried to capture those. Some of the health concern, death risk, those kind of things were talked about, but at the same time, government overreactions, economic downturn, those type of discussions was also prevalent in a various ways. So what we tried from these data set and lots of different ways of trying to understand what is the key streams of discussions, we created a problem solutions opportunities framework, which summarized at least like 8 problems that was suggested or identified by the Twitter discussions. Public transit risky to use during pandemic. Second was not enough space for bicyclists or pedestrians traveling to and from workplace have high chances of getting COVID-19 affected. Lockdown has adverse effects on human physical and mental health. Economic class of public transit companies and not enough guidelines from the government for the safety protocol, risk for reopening schools. So some of those were quite prevalent, and also there was also some talk about the solutions. So the solutions that you're seeing is more coming from that discussions, not our own, but there was some discussion about promoting telecommute. There was some discussion about more walking, biking infrastructure. There was a discussion about formulation of pandemic transportation plan for each city. There was a discussion about AI or mobility data use, Google Maps and Google API, or and I'll talk about that more in my next segment. So there are also opportunities like to look at more active individuals. Connected communities can be created by mixed land use. Those were also talked about. But there was also pessimism within those discussion as well, like which we have not reported in this particular slide, but there was those kind of tensions, anxiety, uncertainty, and really not understanding what's going on was also happening at the very first moment. So this initial understanding from Twitter discussions gave us multiple pathways for formulating research agenda for DalTRAC. So what we did, one group of students started looking at the business establishment impact, like what happened with the closure of business establishment. We had Nova Scotia sales data for all every single business establishment. So we tried to do some work there, try to see by restricting or closure of different businesses, how that affected them. We also started looking at more transport impact and emission impact on that, because that's usually what's happening at the global level since the pandemic started. We wanted to look at the local level. So I will only explain today the impacts of COVID-19 on transport network and HRM, which we tried to do, and we estimated different pollutants, including GHG and NOx, SOx, and particulate matter, and multiple criteria pollutants. So that's our another like a major piece. And again, any research with our PhD, master's student began with a literature review. We were seeing from satellite data or more larger scale top-down models, people were measuring in some cases real time, in some cases estimation, in some cases even prediction. One of the very I would say very vital study came in Nature at that time, which concluded that there was 8.8% reduction in carbon dioxide emission in the whole world in the first half of 2020. And that study, that very large study, also looked at different parts of China in the early stages. In some cases in China, particularly northern China, there was 53.4% decrease in NOx emission during the long lockdown period. And there was also some observations, very minimal, to the city level, New York City, for instance, and some work we also found in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, looking at the very macro level, like what's going on, 31 to 34% decrease in NOx, and some people did NOx, some people particulate matter, some GHG. What concerned me at some point to us, like when that's why we shifted also our research direction at a midpoint. We were also seeing from China experience, as China recovered very quickly from Wuhan outbreak, they were going back to the similar level of emissions than in the business as usual case, meaning that just before lockdown. So we then started out, not only we need to measure that what should be what is the emission during the lockdown, meaning how much GHG savings that we can do. But at the same time, we wanted to understand how reopening may bring different kinds of emissions back and what we need to do about that. And I should recognize at this very moment, we all understand the detrimental fact that COVID-19 brings to public health, to sufferings of many people. But at the same time, there was at least one positive piece coming from this COVID-19 is on the emission side. There was some improvement in the last 2 years, and I would like to emphasize again, because I got the similar question in Transportation Association of Canada conference, like there was a highlight that yes, COVID-19 is actually bringing more suffering than the kind of benefit you are discussing. And I will full disclosure, I'm not no stranger to COVID-19 impact on human lives. As a matter of fact, I lost my father on this, so I'm fully recognition of the negative impact. But at the same time, as a researcher, we are always get excited on looking at like what can we capture from any crisis and turn those into opportunities. So what we started doing, thankfully, we had a transport network model for Halifax Regional Municipality. We are working for at least 4 or 5 years, which has activity generation module, meaning we tried to, for each person in Halifax, we tried to see what is their activity agenda in a daily basis, for home to work, or shopping, recreation, those type of things. And then we have a mode choice component, we have vehicle allocation component, and which gives us in certain way some estimation of origin destination matrices. This is a quite standard industry standard modeling framework, but there was innovations on the activity side, but we had that model operational. At the same time, we had commercial vehicle model as well. So we had the long haul traffic model as well as delivery truck model. And with our initials understanding of what's going on with COVID, we are also observing online shopping going up. So delivery truck movements are also happening in a enhanced way, in a bigger way. So that looks like that component of the network model was also very interesting to bring them within our multi-class assignment process, so that we can see on the road network what's going on for different kinds of scenarios. So that's in a nutshell the modeling component works. And this is like our network model and descriptor. We have 222 traffic analysis zone, which we created many years ago with one M-Plan student. And HRM is utilizing it for since then. And we also identified 3 external zones. It's not True Ruins or Bridgewater. It's just a highway bound towards that, because there are always external trips happening, and we are not too much interested when we are doing a local level model. We just need to get those vehicles out from the network, particularly long haul. We also have different kinds of centroid traffic, TAG centroid, and links, 5,000 links. So quite a detailed model, I would say. Only local roads were not represented, but major highways, major arterials, and major roads like Roby or major directional roads were there, and almost 500 turns. So quite representative of the network. And after using that model, what it gives, our output from here, is traffic volume by link, the congestion level, if you would like to go that congestion level, origin destination movement. So we can do a lot of output from this type of model. Then we use that to another we call a coupled model, which is the vehicular emission model developed by EPA. Environmental Protection Agency of US, but we made that a Canadian version recently, or 3 years ago, I would say. So we used that movement data, traffic data, and used vehicle age distribution, road type, fuel supply data of HRM, and some meteorological data from local weather. And we got some emissions hourly profile for each pollutant that we considered. And then we did some GIS analysis for spatial distribution of pollutants. We compare those based on different scenarios at either at the link level as well as zonal levels to understand that. So in our study, we considered 4 separate scenarios. Number 1 is the business as usual scenario, meaning pre-COVID, the model that we had, meaning that's how HRM folks travel. So we had that business as usual model. Then we had a lockdown scenario. We considered very strict timeline, March 22nd to April 30th, like the complete lockdown. Of course, there was lockdown in different stages, but we for the sake of the models of brevity, we put those timelines in when auto trips decreased by 50%. Shopping districts by 26%, and again the recreational 50%. So there was 54% of the work activities was down, as well as the long haul truck. And we got those data from those real-time observation from Google and Apple, because in some way they are also collecting data through our Bluetooth and other things. Which is a separate discussion, but they were publishing for the public good. They were publishing those observations at the city level for most North American cities. And then we also considered 2 reopening scenario. And again, at that time, that moment when we are designing and implementing this research, we are very optimistic that we are reopening very soon. So our reopening scenario 1 and 2, that last one will be 2, is just a typo. So May to June was the timeline when we wanted to timestamp to get the traffic movement at the same time to get the emission movement. Again, we got all of those data from Google COVID-19 community mobility reports and Apple mobility trends report to get those volumes and some understanding of it. But the overall, the basic model, the business as usual model, was benefited from HRM sponsored survey, DalTRAC Halifax survey 2018. We just finished on 2018 that data set and implemented it within our model. So we are very lucky in such a way to get our operational model ready at that time. For the truck traffic data, we use some GPS truck movement data to forecast and predict those things. We also used other kinds of data for the emission modeling, for example, business establishment data, motor vehicle registry for the fleet age distributions, and various other needs. There was some assumptions made as well, so that we can get going, not just waiting for all good data coming in. So these are the results. So we did multi-class. Multi-class means all vehicle considered transit, passenger car, and commercial vehicle movements. And you can see the output directly from AME software, that this is HRM at the middle, Halifax Peninsula at the middle. So you can see some of the movement during peak period and evening peak period. Usually our models run for 24 hours, but we chose to only limit that for the peak hours for this particular study. So you can see the map of 7 to 8 and 8 to 9, like what's going on at the network level, just at least visual representation. In total, in the lockdown, there was a 44% decrease in total traffic in the morning peak period, and in the 68% decrease in the total evening peak period. And we also tried to validate those. I'm not sure whether we included those slides, but we tried to validate. I will come to that. We validated that. For the initial model, we validated data because we had video image based traffic counts. So we did the business as usual model, but we got quite challenged how to validate the lockdown and reopening scenarios. Very recently, we got a industry partner who are doing a lot of data collection for other kinds of project traffic volume. So we tried to get those, and we use multiple strategic location to validate how close we are, or if there is any need for calibration of the model. And reopening one, we only see that the same China that I mentioned, there was a only 20% decrease from the business as usual scenario. So that means we went back very much in terms of the traffic, and 15% only in the reopening stage 2. So people there was some change in behavior, and I will talk about that in conclusion, but not enough like that. Whenever we are going back to the status quo. That's the initial observation, if I summarize that. And then we started also like estimating exact tons in tons, GHG. You can see business as usual. We have a total tons there, and we also did the per capita as well. Lockdown, small, reopening is increasing more, and reopening 2 increasing more as well for all traffic. So this is the GHG reduction for all types of mode in the evening. So we actually got 53% reduction in HRM during the lockdown, our GHG emissions. So at least like we have an estimate at this point, and you can see in a couple of New York and other places it was 30 to 30%, 40%. Looks like we did ours was better, but but at the same time in the reopening we have 44% to 31% reduction, and we are not talking about particularly right now. Maybe we are in a process of recruiting another graduate students to move up to this like the more reopening stage 3, 4, 5 to add them in, so that we have a better understanding what's going on. And this is also same graph but separated out by passenger car versus commercial vehicle. Some good reduction in both cases, but commercial vehicle is coming back faster than passenger vehicle. We also segmentize our estimations by suburban, urban, and rural areas, how much gram per square kilometer. It generally, we looked at the trend, generally it mimics like where the activities goes more. So urban area was generating more emissions than suburban, and then rural area list. So nothing surprising here, but we tried to understand also GHG, SOx, NOx, and particulate matter, and volatile component, and THC as well, just to understand what's going on in morning and evening peak, if there is some similarities or dissimilarities. Still, like the student who did this work is still trying to understand the inferences of what does those mean. So we'll probably get more clarity in the reports and articles to be published soon. So lockdown scenario, we did the same thing. Reopening scenario, we did the same thing. I will not go with those numbers, but we also started like visualizing them, like where like things are going on. 53% decrease. Density of GHG is usually in the peninsula area, as you can see during lockdown. Still, like the peninsula is more emitting more, but there are still some suburban areas have a higher density of emissions. And reopening stages, like again, Dartmouth is coming back. You can see on as well as the Bedford Mill Cove area is also generating more. The same thing we did with carbon monoxide, the same thing we did for different periods, morning peak and evening peak. So what it gave us in a way is a better understanding or evidence of like how much traffic movement has changed using the existing tool and a quite a large survey that we did for HRM, DalTRAC Halifax 2018 survey. And it also gave us a good understanding about the emissions and real measurements, not only for the city, but also for zonal level which is quite interesting and probably could be our benchmark or baseline to see how things are happening. So in conclusion, I'm right on time. Sean, is that correct? So in conclusion, like, of course, we estimated emissions to be a significant reduction for Halifax. Traffic volume and emissions are coming back slowly because reopening 1 and 2, we only modeled that. We do not have whether other impacts of say telework and other things still like in the phase 4, 5, 6, whether we are still doing better than other jurisdictions. We haven't done that. That's one of the area we'll be focusing soon. I would say this is one of the very unique local level empirical research that uses activity-based travel demand modeling approach to understand the both transport network as well as network impact as well as emission impact, and we are very happy that both are accepted in TRB, Transportation Research Board. So there will be more discussions of those things, like comparing to other jurisdictions, those who are doing similar kind of work. A couple of observations for the policy. We did other similar work as well, and also we tried to understand from our NovoTrack data, like where actually the activity restrictions effects are predominant. One conclusion we came up with is the working from home. Everybody knows that. Like today, like instead of coming to maybe some public library or school of planning places, we are doing this session online. So that is a significant contributor for reduction of both traffic as well as emissions. So we need to really think very, very carefully. What is our 3DM strategies? How can we retain at least the benefit of it? We are not talking about we can achieve or continue having 53% reduction in HRM, but we can take some good stuff, some teleworking, some remote work might change the game, because very small decrease in traffic may open up a lot of capacities, which will not necessitate building another highway or building another pavement or adding another lane. So that's one piece we got directly from this particular research. The second one is, I would say, it's a little bit more extrapolated from this research, but there is a evidence that public transit ridership got reduced. Evidence from HRM data, evidence from worldwide various places, and not only just the risk, but the perceived risk of public transit use will remain for many years, even when COVID-19 is no longer a threat. So it's very important to start thinking about it as a planner. Like, what does that mean? Do we need just a social campaign or making sanitizations available, or do we need more strategic changes how we should be planning for public transit? Is the buses needs to be changed, the design of it, or the routes needs to be changed, or orientations of sitting needs to be changed? It will not just come back, reset button after COVID-19 that will be, unless like there are captive riders, which has other problem of social equity and environmental justice issues. So it's very important to give a lots of thought for public transit to come back, because otherwise any gain that we do from the teleworking or reduction of single occupant, we will lose from public transit. At the same time, we will lose from ride sharing, ride hailing services in Toronto, in San Francisco Bay Area, all over the world. There is a significant decrease in ride hailing services. AT infrastructure planning, there are interest on that, connecting connecting origin and destination is key. It's not just how many kilometers of active transportation we have, it's connecting so that that can enable commute trip, that can enable reduce the trips on the auto. So those are very, very important. We have an explicitly model AT as well here, but from our Twitter data, you can see there are interest on that. There are this societal goal, and it merge with the COP26 and other kinds of ideas as well. Another emerging area that I would say is this online shopping and local truck delivery. This is very under researched area everywhere, not just in Halifax. It's everywhere. Even like we had a meeting a couple of months ago with Transport Canada, like that last mile problem is becoming a problem. So that's very, very important to look at. For us, we are also thinking about looking at more research on long-term impact if there is COVID-19 affecting us to do some residential location auto ownership changes, those kind of things. That concludes my presentation today, but I must acknowledge my terrific graduate students, particularly PhD student Asif, as well as the master student Fariba, who is defending this week, and many other graduate students who did tremendous work. And I would like to also acknowledge our NSERC Alliance grant for COVID-19, which enabled doing this work with our engineering and planning students. Thank you very much. And questions, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Habib. We have some question from the chat. And if anyone else would like to put questions in the chat, I'll keep my eye out. So a question for clarification, was the word bus used in the data mining? You talked about transit bicycle. Was bus one of the ones that was data mined?
Public transit. So public transit, like put as a together. So bus was also used there as well.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I see a comment about the Burnside Expressway. Is that meant to be a question or just meant to be a comment there? Also, I guess out to Jeff, if you want to chime in here with anything on that, that's an opportunity right now.
Sean, is it a question or like I can't see the chat box?
So yeah, sorry. So Jeff pointed in the chat and just said all the reason why it's not too late to stop building the Burnside Expressway. So more of a comment, I guess, that Jeff put out there for everyone to think about.
we need to really think through.
Thoughts on that? Yeah,
sure. We really need to think through about like where do we put our infrastructure dollars. And with COVID COVID is giving a kind of a reset button in certain way. We cannot rely on one type of modes. That was true before COVID. That was also true with COVID. And I think there needs to be serious thoughts about when we do not have yet a good public transit network or a good public active transportation network, how much like we should be putting more in terms of highway constructions or more road traffic. 77% is our auto mode, single occupant auto mode share, and 2% bicycle. Does not make sense, and we have a long way to go.
Okay, thanks for that thought. Jeff's comment was he thinks it would be a good place to think about higher order transit in that Burnside corridor. So thoughts there?
Absolutely. That's I alluded it just at the network, and network means like it needs to be hierarchical public transit. There needs to be higher order transit, some medium sized transit, and then some local services. And it was never been taught that way. Like if you even look at transport engineering or transport planning books, you'll see, oh, for us, primary road, secondary road, but we never see primary transit, secondary transit. So I was actually teaching it for a long time in the classroom, not only for public transit, but also for active transportation. We need active, say, bike superhighway, and then bike collectors, so that there are different ways of engaging to this. Otherwise, just creating some parts, not adding them all, will not yield the kind of results that we have seen, which nature forced us to, and I will connect it with my presentation. Nature forced us to reduce 53% of the emissions, but we need to be creative on that to do that.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. So a question is, Halifax a good candidate for congestion pricing, and could this be a policy tool to consider for greenhouse gas reductions here?
Right. Depends on which congestion pricing strategy we are talking about. I have some reservation, and it's more my personal opinion about, say, London, UK type of congestion, zonal congestion pricing. The reason is usually, say, London or big cities have some sort of a growth boundaries established, or there are at least some invisible growth boundaries in various places, because no longer even an auto trip for commuting is feasible. And in those cases, like pricing to come to downtown or major pieces may make sense. In our case, my fear is, for the goodness of, like, say, environment, we might put the carbon pricing, not carbon pricing, congestion pricing on the core, like the way UK or other folks did. We might sprawl more. People started living in, we are already extending 103, 102, 101. So the fear is the sprawling there. But I totally agree, or like many people probably will be agreeing from an expertise point of view, is some sort of a carbon pricing by, say, vehicle kilometer traveled. Those kind of innovative way of, like if we can do those kind of personal credit, and this was talked about in COP26. It was talked in Kyoto, if I recall correctly. It was talked various period of time. So congestion pricing needs to be thoughtful, but it may work.
Okay, lots to chew on there. Is there anyone other than New York in North America looking at congestion pricing seriously that you're aware of? Just as a follow-up to that.
I think San Francisco Bay Area is doing a lot, and there are lots of jurisdictions did congestion pricing or some sort of a pricing at the critical infrastructure level, say bridges, New Jersey, New York bridges, and many other bridges. Like the point level congestion pricing is congestion pricing, or some pricing, road pricing. Even in Toronto, like 407 is in a way road pricing strategy. So there are those kind of things. But in a larger level, I think you're probably right. New York and maybe Bay Area had some things in place.
Excellent. Okay, so a question here. Is it true that, or some have suggested that work at home creates more emissions from residential buildings, which outpace emission reduction from transport? Is that true? Thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah, very early stage of research happening in that area, but this is one active area we are seeing that people are getting engaged in. The most recent study that I saw, it's a 30% increase of the residential energy use. The question becomes not how much increase of the energy use in that case. Question becomes more, what is the source of the energy? If it's like Nova Scotia, and I'm not talking about this 30% increase in Nova Scotia, I forgot exactly in either whether it's probably it's in Europe, either Scotland, some places there. Question is, say, if it's a coal-fire energy, then the emission life cycle is different than if it's a more renewable energy type of coal. So that's a completely very different kind of conversation, like getting the full life cycle piece bringing together. But I have no doubt in my mind, if we can effectively utilize work from home, compressed work hours, all the TDM strategy. This was advocated before COVID-19, like remote working, flexible office hours. I have no doubt like that will improve tailpipe emissions, which is very, very important. And it might have also secondary and tertiary impacts on many other things, say car production, say more open spaces, less parking pavement in the area. So it will be very difficult to draw a direct comparison that oh, if we promote teleworking, we might get more emissions because residential energy use is going up. It needs to be studied more holistically, but my gut feeling is telework at certain level may ensure both productivity at the same time may work for us in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. And this net zero emission by 2050, I don't know what else we can do. That's very important. And transportation is one of the highest growth sector in emission, and second in Canada in terms of contributing.
Great, thanks again. So going to open up last call, I guess, for questions. We're coming up to about 5 minutes to 1 o'clock. So great questions, great responses, and a lot of stuff to chew on. So I'll just give you a second to crack for anyone out there to pop into the chat with your questions. While we do that, is there anything else you think you'd like to sum up, or any kind of final thoughts based on the questions in general?
I would like to thank you everyone for coming to these sessions, and it's always it's always inspiring to share some of the work that our great graduate students are doing and doing at the local level, utilizing local data. So I think I'm really grateful that for this opportunity to talk about with our licensed professionals planners of Nova Scotia and many others interested, including the students I can see in the audience. So thank you very much for spending your time again another time in the screen.
Yeah, lots of time on the screen lately for everyone. So I'd like to thank everyone as well. And we had upwards of 40 people on here at one point, so that's fantastic. People seem to be liking the webinar. So back to the question of telework or telelearning in this case. The final thing is this is being recorded, so if you have colleagues or classmates or friends who might be interested, this will be up on the API website in the next couple of days. So if you want to have another look or send it along to someone, that's another place to do it. So thank you again, Dr. Habib, and thank you everyone else. We'll see you at the next webinar sometime.
Thank you very much.